Hi everyone, I hope all of you are doing fine today. And today we have a very interesting topic, and please make sure that you pay close attention to what we are going to work with today. So allow me a second. I'm going to show you the topic for today. Today we are going to work with the topic marking the tones. So today we will learn how you can mark the tones in a sentence. Remember, we have four tones that we learned in the last class. We have high, low, extra high, and normal. So here we go. First, you need to know, or you already know, that we have two types of intonation. We have rising intonation here, and we have rising falling intonation. So we need to know first, before marking the tones, the type of intonation that each sentence has. So as we have seen, uh, the sentences that have rising falling intonation are those that have WH questions have rising falling intonation, statements, and commands. I know all of you already handle that. Now, something that we didn't touch that much was the sentences that have rising intonation. Well, those sentences are only questions, okay? But what type of questions? Those questions that don't start with a WH word. Those questions that can be answered with a yes or with a no. Those questions that start with the auxiliaries like do, will, would, can, could, shall, all the auxiliaries that you can use to ask questions. Even the verb to be, when you ask a question with it, it has rising intonation. Now, so make sure that you see here the separation. 90% of sentences have rising falling intonation, and only at 10% have rising intonation. Okay, now just give it a quick view to this, internalize it, and do whatever you have to do so you can learn the separation of this rising and rising falling. Here we have a short exercise to make sure that you understood what we said before. Here I leave 6 sentences. So your job is that you have to write RF or R, depending on the type of intonation. If you believe that the sentence has rising falling, you put RF. If you think that the sentence has rising intonation, then you put an R. And after you finish, you just make sure you go back and see if the sentence that you chose have the correct intonation type. So here we go. How can you mark the tones in a sentence? We have 4 steps to follow. The first step is that you need to identify the type of intonation that the sentence has. And that's what we just did right now, okay? Here in this little exercise, I was trying to help you identify which intonation goes to which sentence. So after you have identified the type of intonation that the sentence has, the second step is that you have to look for the last content word. So look for the last content word in the sentence, okay? When you find the last content word, the third step is that you have to start marking the tones with the normal one. So you always start with the normal tone. Then when you do that, the last step, step number 4, is that you have to give the high tone to the last content word, okay? If you feel I'm going too fast, just pause the video and read the steps that you have here on the screen. Now, I also wanted to clarify about the difference between glide and shift. It says here that glide is only used in rising falling intonation. Okay, it's only in rising falling. In rising intonation, you don't have glide. So the glide is used when the last word of the sentence is a content word and it has rising, falling intonation. All right? Then the shifts are used in both, in rising, falling, and in rising, because a shift is the separation of one tone and another between syllables, okay? Shifts happen between syllables, but glides happen between in the same syllable, okay? So if you have any question, make sure you watch the previous video from last class and you can have a great, better clarification about this topic. So here we'll continue. Now, in order for you to see how you can apply the 4 steps, here I prepare 4 sentences for you. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I don't have a lot of time on the video. So here we go with the first one. So we're gonna apply the first step. First step, identify the type of sentence. What type of sentence is this one? John talks to me. Is that a question? No. Is that a command? No. So basically, if it is not a question, that means that we are working here with rising, falling intonation. Because remember, rising intonation are only questions. So this is not a question, which means that I'm working with rising, falling intonation. But which type of sentence is it? This is a statement. So remember, statement is whatever you say that is not a question, is not, and is not a command in this case. So I have the first step. I know it's rising, falling, right? So second step, look for the last content word. You can see the content word here in black, okay? That's the second step. Third step, you have to start with a normal tone. So I start here marking the normal tone, okay? Last step, give the high tone to the content word, to the last content word. So the last content word is talks. So I start a normal, give the high tone to talks, and then I give the low tone to whatever comes after, as you can see here. So that is rising and that is falling. Rising because it goes up and falling because it goes down, all right? Now let's go to the second sentence. First step, identify the type of sentence, not the type of sentence, the type of intonation that the sentence has. This says, who called the police? It has WH at the beginning. If it is a WH question, then that means that it is rising, falling. Second step, look for the last content word. Last content word in black here, police. Third step, start normal. So I'm gonna start normal up and I'm gonna stop on the last content word. Here we have a problem. What's the problem? As we're working with rising, falling intonation, it means it has to go up and it has to go down. But here, the last word is a content word. So what happens when you have this case? You need to think about 2 things. Number 1, you have to see how many syllables you have in the last content word. If the word has more than 1 syllable, what you're going to do is you're going to give the high tone to the first syllable, and then you're going to give the low tone to the rest of the syllables. Like this case, you have police. Police has 2 syllables. So we give high tone to paw, and then we give the low tone to lease. Police, as you can see, okay? Then let's go to the next one. I love you. Well, I love you is actually a statement, rising, falling. I see that love is the only content word, last content word. So I start normal in I give the high tone to love, and I give the low tone to you. Why do I give the low tone to you? Because you is a function word. If you go back to the first one, I gave the low tone to and me because they are function words. Here in the number 2, I had to give the high tone and the low tone in the same word, but it has more than 1 syllable. So that's right, I did that this way. Now let's go to the last one. And I want you to pay attention to the number 2 and the number 4. So in number 4 says, come here. Come here is a command, is an imperative sentence, which means is rising, falling, okay? So we only have 2 words, but it doesn't matter how many words we have, but in this case we have 2. So I have here, here is a content word, which is the last word. So I start normal, and as you can see, here is a monosyllable word. It only has 1 syllable, which means that I cannot use shift because shift happens between syllables. So what do? I use a glide. A glide is the change from one tone to another in the same syllable. Okay, so as you can see here, I give the high tone to here in the middle of the vowel, and then I go down and give the low tone. So this is when you use shift, and this is when you use glide. You use shift normally between syllables, but you use glide in the same syllable. When do you use the glide? Well, when the sentence has rising, falling, and the last word of the sentence is a content word, and besides being a content word, it is a monosyllable one. If you have any questions, make sure that you go back to the video, play back, and see what I just said. Let's go to the next one. So here we have an explanation about rising intonation. Remember, the previous was rising, falling, how you mark the tones in rising, falling. Now we're gonna see how you mark the tones in rising intonation. As you can see, there is no glide in none of the sentences because glide is only used in rising, falling. So let's go to the first sentence. The steps are the same. The steps for marking the tones in rising intonation are the same as in rising, falling. First, let's identify the type of sentence, I mean the intonation for the sentence. And as we can see, we have, will you come here? You know this is rising intonation for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, it starts with an auxiliary. It's a question that starts with an auxiliary, okay? It's not WH word, and you can answer the question with a yes or with a no. So now we know it's rising intonation, okay? You look for the last content word. Last content word is here. So you start normal, that's step number 3, and you stop where you see the last content word. So you give the high tone to the last content word, and there you finish. Because it's rising intonation. It never goes down. It keeps up all the time. Now, in the second sentence, we will discover the type of intonation. It is rising because you have a question that you can answer with a yes or with a no, but at the same time is a question that starts with the verb to be, which belongs to the rising intonation questions type, okay? Step number 2, find last content word, mother. Step number 3, start normal. Stop where you find the last content word and give the high tone to it. But what about if the last word of the sentence is not a content word? So let's go to example number 3. Here says, does the teacher talks, well, there is a little mistake in here. Let me correct that. Okay, here we are. Sorry about that. Okay, so here says, does the teacher talk to you? As you can notice here, this is an auxiliary, so it's rising intonation. You can answer with a yes and or no, and that's rising intonation. And we're gonna look for the last content word, which is talk. To and you are function words. So step number 3, start marking the normal tone. Stop where you find the last content word and give the high tone to it. In rising intonation, you don't have to go down. So when you give the high tone to the last content word, all the rest has the high tone, okay? So make sure you pay attention to that so you don't get confused between rising and rising falling intonation. Finally, I'm going to leave a homework for you, and this homework is going to be in Edmodo. Now, the homework, I believe I'm leaving there 6 or 7 sentences for you. And these 6 or 7 sentences, you have to mark the tones. Listen, if you don't know how to mark the tones in the computer, as I did here, what you have to do is take your notebook, write the sentences, leave space, leave 2 spaces or 3 spaces so I can see her clearly, and mark the tones in the sentences. When you mark the tones, what you have to do is you take a picture of it and you upload it to the homework that I'm going to leave. If you have any questions, you can write me on WhatsApp, or just make sure you watch the video at least twice, and then I'll be able to answer. You can also write me on Edmodo, and I'll be there for you. So remember, stay home, stay safe, and don't go out.